During Skirmish Season 8, the primary focus was on the heroes that were LLing and the very, very dynamic meta. But something very interesting happened that largely flew under the radar. Brevant, that's right, Brevant, earned 8 points, taking down 2 events across the world. That's not one event, not just some meme or some one-off collusion. It's 2 events. That's right, Brevant, the UPF-focused hero who, in Blitz, has functionally no advantage over the existing Guardians. So does the fact that he can win events, albeit sparingly, does it indicate to us something larger about the strength of fatigue?
A huge shout out to our channel members for supporting what we do here. If you want to get involved with the channel and the Dice Commando community, please consider joining as a channel member. Remember, these videos are only possible with your support. You can show that support with a like, a subscribe, and by leaving us a comment and sharing your feedback. Community first, and go Commando.
Hey there, my flesh and blood friends. Welcome back to Dice Commando and Go Again, a fabulous cast. Thanks for checking in today as we're talking Brevant and maybe some stuff we can learn about the larger meta from what happened with him in Skirmish Season 8, right? Which is pulling down those 2 wins. Now, let's just get this on the table. There's going to be probably someone out there that's going to try and spin this that I'm calling out the pilot winners, and nothing could be farther from the truth. I actually think it's pretty baller that someone was like, Brevant? Yeah, I can win with that. Why not?
Challenge accepted.
And yes, they did prove it is possible. And to be clear, the credit for this goes to one player, the player known as Souldry. Both of the lists are actually graciously available on February. There are actually 2 different versions, a chivalry-focused one, and then obviously a more practical one that includes poppers, which is probably the more generically useful one. But either way, was able to do it with a very similar fatigue-heavy list. Been able to do it in 2 different ways. Although, again, if you go look at the list, they're very, very, very similar. You're just swapping out the chivalries for a bunch of more functional blue cards. All right. Now, it is clear that Brevant can do things, and no one can really argue that now, but one has to admit that functionally, right, Brevant has really 0 advantage over the other Guardians. Brevant himself, his ability is around protecting, which by and large, you're not really going to do in a 2-player match. It actually kind of works against you in basically every level, right? Especially if you're playing for the fatigue strategy, because why would you spend cards, right? You're probably not even attacking outside of your hammer. But then if you look at him, and to be fair, someone could make the same argument on, let's say, Yoji here. Yoji's ability, basically worthless, but Yoji's done things because he has 22 health. That extra 2 health, again, if you're playing a fatigue-based strategy, 2 health, I'm not going to say extra mileage, but it is in its own way, right? That 2 health can make an absolute big difference. Now, Valda has 21 health, and a lot of folks have played her in the past also on a fatigue-type strategy. It's way more, especially after Yoji came out, people skewed away from that on Valda, because if you were going to play fatigue with Valda and not use her ability, why not just start with the 1 extra health? So most of the Valda lists these days use Sift and all that to try and do her thing. She's super good. She's not super good, but she's absolutely super fun. And she can do things, and again, she's, who hasn't taken a Valda, like nearly like dominated free, they play it for free, it's dominated. Anyway, you get it, right? But now you're comparing Brevant again to Yoji. They're essentially blank cards at 22, even if you're playing Valda that are essentially blank cards at 21, they're not equivalent. And then you look at Brevant versus Bravo. Well, now they are equivalent on raw stats, but Bravo is anything but a blank card. He also has the specs, some very good specs, right? Crippling Crush. He's got Showtime. No, well, Showtime pulls it. It's the new one that's blanking me. Showstopper or whatever the heck it is. Starstruck. That's the new one from Dusk Till Dawn. Anyway, so you see in the comparison that, just to be blunt, there is 0 reason to play Brevant over the other Guardians, in my opinion. Which means that Souldry was basically this is me paraphrasing, but Souldry was basically saying, I can still do this with a blank card with 20 health. Right, so with that said, what does that tell us about the relative strength of fatigue in the meta right now? Or just in general in Blitz? I think quite a lot. If you can have essentially a blank card with even that 2 less health come in and win those events, I think it means a lot. Now, there's going to be some counter arguments out there, which is completely fair, and you're welcome to leave them below in the comments. That, well, it was just 2 events. You could be taking those out of context. Absolutely, completely fair. Absolutely, completely fair, right? And again, that individual was likely doing it so they could get their name on Brevant and show that they did it with Brevant, and fair enough, right? But again, you're looking at a character that is basically blank, that is just playing essentially a canned fatigue strategy, right? Now you could go and say, well, he's got a hammer that's special and he's got chivalry, but that's functionally the same as, this example I have up right now is not exactly 1-to-1. But again, if you're not protecting, chivalry is essentially a titanium bauble, right? Give or take. Now, in the case where Titan's Fist would have titanium bauble in the pitch zone, like I'm showing here, it actually would only come in for 3. Whereas above, it would actually come in for 4, right? The Hammer of Havenhold would come in for 4 with that. So fair enough. But again, if you're playing blues that all have cost of 3, which is not that hard to do in Guardian, Titan's Fist is essentially guaranteed to swing for 4. So you have this, and then you got the shield on top of that, right? You have Brevant shield, and then you have Steelblade Buckler, which are functionally the same card, right? Obviously, one has Protect, which is different in UPF, but again, in a 2-player match, they're functionally the same card, right? So you have this overall just like canned strategy that you can put, obviously, anyone in the class who has access to it. But that's very interesting, right? That you can essentially just port these heroes into this strategy. And then I kind of want to build on that with a lot of the conversations we've been having lately about being a hero main versus a class main or something like that. Well, this is a prime example, I think, of that into kind of the portable fatigue strategy. And then sure, like, you could even draw lines of the fatigue strategy into like the Decimator Great Axe Warrior line. Now, obviously, they don't have the blue 6s and all that. So definitely weaker from certain perspectives, but they have reactions and stuff like that. But again, you have, if you go look at these lists, and again, I will link the lists below, but you can also go find them. And again, thank you, Souldry, for putting them up so we can talk about it, right? But you go look at the list, it's nothing super cutting edge, right? I mean, it's just a good list overall. And you can really draw a lot of lines to many, many playstyles with that. So, I think to that end, fatigue's pretty good, right? So to close this out, why is fatigue so... Now, to be clear, I'm not saying that because Brevant won, that fatigue is the best strategy in the meta. Not what I'm saying, right? We know Briar's very good. Briar's doing very well into fatigue. If you give her time to set up CMHs and stuff, she can come over top pretty hard. I made some statements around that in a video, I don't know, a week and change ago. And I have to retract some of that, right? CMH has definitely been taking down my fatigue decks. So fair enough. My apologies. I made a mistake. But fatigue's still very, very, very good. There are not a lot of heroes that can outlast like a Yoji fatigue. And it's very clear from the results that there's not a lot of heroes that can outlast just a canned fatigue deck with a blank 20-point hero, 20 health hero. So anyway, that's my piece. I really thought that this was very interesting because, we've seen in times before where like, I think it was like Datadol. Someone's like, how did they win with Datadol? And they won 1. And, you're like, oh, there could have been some shenanigans, could have been some deals being made. The fact that they took down 2, I think implies not. Again, I wasn't there. I don't know. I haven't talked to the individual, and the offer is always there. If you want to come talk to us, we'd love to figure it out. Give us a rundown of your deck. And anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and close it out because I'm just rambling at this point. But thanks, folks. Let me know your thoughts if you agree or you disagree with my fatigue statements and kind of my surprise about this whole thing and what it really means for kind of the archetype in the game altogether. So that'll do it. Nothing else, folks. Go Commando.